Hello and welcome to the IdeaCast interview series, episode number 80. My guest in this episode is Jocelyn Johnson, author of the memoir A Path Forward, My Journey to Finding Healing Through Integrative Medicine. And Jocelyn has a background in engineering and healthcare, and when faced with not one but two cancer diagnoses, she chose to look at integrative medicine, and that's the crux of her message in this book is her journey through not only healing but exploring what integrative medicine had to offer for her. So I hope you enjoy the conversation. It was good and I believe a valuable set of insights for all of us should we ever have to face something like she faced. So thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy the conversation. I'd like to welcome Jocelyn Johnson to the IdeaCast interview series, where we will be discussing her book, A Path Forward. I've read the book and I was very impressed with it. I think it's a very it's a revealing. It's a lot of insight from Jocelyn, her personal path that she's walked, and so I want to share that with you guys in the audience in this conversation. So, Jocelyn, welcome. I'm really glad to have you here today.
It's my pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I thought your book was well written. I think you communicated very well your story and a lot of insights and a lot of information that I think people, not just people dealing with health issues, but people who are, so there's two sides. There's a liminal space there. There's like people who have health issues that are like, what do I do? And then there's people who are healthy, perhaps, quote unquote, but they want to continue to make sure things stay that way. And I think this book serves both of those interests. I think you provide a lot of good information, and so I will entrust you with revealing that information and doing better justice to what you've accomplished in this book. But I just want to set that up in the beginning. So what I think might be good in a classic sense is to learn about you, learn a little bit about your background. You do this in the book to good effect, but we'll start with that, and then maybe I'll ask you some questions related to the narrative of the book, the memoir.
Okay, so I started out of college as a mechanical engineer and worked in aerospace for about 4 years. Discovered I didn't really like the culture, and it wasn't holding me in terms of a sense of being life-sustaining. I ended up dropping out for a little while, trying an alternative living situation. And then I transitioned into career in nursing. I started out getting an associate's degree and went on to get a master's degree in psychiatric nursing. I found working in the field in clinic settings to be constraining, and I wanted less of a sense of a ceiling. So I started a private practice, and in my private practice, I was able to take more time with people. I also, in the continuing ed process, which all professionals need to maintain in order to maintain their license, I started getting training in functional medicine. And that was like a homecoming for me because I was interested in a more holistic approach towards healing from my early days. And I was finally able to get more evidence-based knowledge and to start utilizing that when I was working with people in my private practice setting as an adult clinical nurse specialist in psych mental health nursing. So I encountered my own health problems and applied a lot of what I had learned over the years about holistic healing to my own healing journey. And because I was starting to have success, I got interested in trying to document it, and that ended up being this memoir.
And in reading your journey, as you just laid out, I think you can truly claim to have an integrated perspective of health, both proactive and reactive. And so you started out in more of a classical healthcare environment, as some might say allopathic, and then you also took that journey into the other aspect of integrative medicine, which you just described, the functional medicine. And I do want to open that up a little bit, like the 5 R's of functional medicine I found very interesting. And so we'll share that perhaps at a point. But I want to touch back to your having lived in that community in, I believe it was Nevada. And when you were young, when you were transitioning out of sort of a left brain career of engineering and finding yourself a little bit, do you feel like do you want to share some of that? Because I thought there were some interesting insights from your maturation process or your knowing yourself that were had in that experience. So do you want to first describe the community and then maybe some of the insights that were gained from that community?
Sure. This was an intentional spiritual community that was started by Rolling Thunder, who was a Cherokee medicine man. And he had a book written about him, and he became quite popular as a result of that book, and decided that he could teach people about a more earth-oriented lifestyle, where he just started an intentional community. That community was started and lasted, I don't know, 13 years or so. I was there during the last 3 years, and it was a pivotal experience for me personally, because I was coming from the very head-oriented engineering world, dealing with the loss of a sibling who passed away due to a cancer. And I really needed time. I needed time to re-ground myself with a sense of purpose and a more heartfelt orientation towards how I wanted to spend my time. So what I found there were some really interesting things, chances to feel integrated, chances to feel a sense of belonging, and, you know, a time where reorienting towards health-related things really started to germinate in me.
And I believe in that experience, this was a good opening of a door into mindful eating and health and nutrition from that perspective of nourishment and eating. If I recall, there was it was an anecdote of there was a health food store nearby, and it was an Elko or somewhere like that, and you'd go off and get your little sinful indulgence of yogurt, but nonetheless, I think you were discovering, maybe mindful eating's not the right word, but just, opening that door again of discovery to understand that's part of the, if you want to say tripartite, of health and taking care of yourself. So there's the mind, the emotional, there's the physiological with the nutrition, and then maybe something beyond that, which is more spiritual, I think. But yeah, I think, isn't that kind of where you kind of were learning about nutrition and how it impacts the body?
I certainly was learning about that, about my own physiology and how my system processed dairy, even in college. But when I experienced that challenge with yogurt, I became aware that there was some way I was using that food to numb myself. And it wasn't a particularly healthy thing to be doing, to be basically going into some kind of a cognitive fog in response to a food that my particular body did not manage well. That's what dawned on me there about my relationship with yogurt in particular. It's just characteristics of what food sensitivities can do to us physiologically and mentally. In that case, I was actually using it to numb my mind.
I'm guilty of that too. One of my drugs of choice is chocolate. Yeah, guilty. So, but I know what you're saying. I mean, it is comforting yourself, and it's a chance to indulge yourself. That reward mechanism thing, I think. And so, extracting from the beginning of the book, as well, I think you were very candid and you gave us some insights into your family structure, and you mentioned a sibling who was a little bit younger than you, I think by 2 years, who had passed away from, I believe it was leukemia. And also you were very again generous in sharing about your parents and the relationship there. And I think that does tie in the book because it was revisited later in a later chapter, having to just continually work on that and revisit that. So to the extent that you're comfortable, and you shared in the book, you share about family history before we move forward in your story. So to share about your parents, and there was some dysfunction there, and that gets imprinted on us. That's ingrained in us as we move through adolescence into adulthood. So I think that's an important component to share.
I certainly feel like in my own health journey that this book is about that period of time where I was seeking healing from the cancer that I was dealing with. Mm-hmm. That issues that were unresolved from long ago kept coming up. I was surprised at how the energy of those traumas continued to be affecting me in the present. Mm-hmm. As part of a holistic healing process, I wanted to look at, the emotional element, and the emotional element was quite tied up with my family history and how issues had continued to carry forward, and we're continuing to seek some kind of healing, some kind of resolution. So my parents split when I was 8. My dad had a problem with alcohol. Mm-hmm. My mom ended up doing the lion's share of raising us the rest of the way, and became an amazing role model. I was lucky in that regard. She really held it together and mm-hmm. helping us all get through college, and was a pretty amazing person in that regard.
Yeah. And I was warmed by the share that you did with moving in with her, with your daughter. And so you had 3 generations under one roof. And if I get emotional about things, I thought that was really neat. And that was really an opportunity for your daughter to have 2 wonderful moms in the house, and have that unique perspective, or that unique environment, I guess is the right way to say that. So yeah, she was there for you. But yeah, I thought it was important because, again, with your father having issues and then your mother having to struggle, and I came from a single parent household, and I was raised by a single mom as well. So I felt that parallel there. So let's talk about when you were notified of you speak to 2 incidents of cancer in this book. And so let's talk about the first incident, which, yeah, I'll just let you share the details on that, but if we were to compare this to the second incident of cancer, that you went perhaps more the conventional route on this one, and sort of walk the walk that they were outlining for you in their protocols and interventions and things like that. So can you share that first bout of cancer that you dealt with?
Sure. I had the symptoms of uterine cancer and got it checked out. Turned out to be the case. And what was immediately recommended to me was a total hysterectomy. And I decided, sure, I should do that. I'm not using this organ anymore.
Right.
And the odds of a cure were 90%. So that's pretty good, I also did some changes in my diet and used some supplements I thought would be helpful, and kept that up for a significant period of time, 6 months on the diet, and at least a year on some of the supplements. And about 14 months later, I was diagnosed with a vaginal reoccurrence. So that was the first journey. I really did try to approach it holistically, and really felt like I needed to raise my energy deal with emotional trauma that may have been predisposing me to be beleaguered physically. And I did a lot of work with yoga and meditation to try to move through those things and start approaching my kind of tendency to be ruminative in my thinking process differently. And I really felt like I put a lot of good energy into that. It was quite the shocker to end up with a recurrence.
Yeah, and that's, to me, that's a pivotal point in the book, because I think you were doing, as you just said, you were doing spiritual work, you were doing yoga, and you were minding your physical health by way of nutrition. But that lens widened out a lot when that second bout of cancer came on board. So if we could back up just for a second, and can you onboard some narrative about how thunderstorm over here? Hope my power doesn't go. Apology. We'll do it. We'll rejoin. So I'm just saying that now in case the power goes out. Mostly for you, Jocelyn. The people on YouTube won't see it. It'll be edited up. But you were in following kind of a Sikh-based yogic practice, and can you share some of the background on that? How that came into the picture as it relates to both incidents of cancer and how you use that as a vehicle of transformation and support, probably more than that.
Yeah, I would say as a yogi, I basically got very into the asana practices. Even in college, I got more seriously into it, doing it for years, every day. When my daughter was about 12, so that would have been in the late 90s. But meditation to me was always a challenge, because the style of meditation of sitting and watching your thoughts, or watching your breathing, or looking at a candle, were not somehow strong enough to help me disengage with my chattery mind. At a certain point, I discovered that there was a whole issue of a whole tradition of using mantras, particularly in Kundalini yoga. I was so drawn to that, and the way that the energy of sound kind of resonates within the body, within the mind, that I knew immediately that this was an access point for me into meditation, to be able to go deeper through the use of sound and the way that sound would resonate. I think we often have dual awareness when we're meditating. We have the focus and we have the stray thoughts that come and go, and we do our best to observe them and release them. It really helped me to anchor myself in sound. When I found that, I became very interested in getting trained in Kundalini yoga, which I did. And the yogi who brought that to the States was a Sikh man. And a lot of the mantras used in that tradition come out of Sikh sacred texts. I studied at an ashram in Millis, Massachusetts. That is a Sikh-based ashram where they teach this style of Kundalini yoga that was brought to the States by Yogi Bhajan.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's my entry into Sikhism, was actually through mantra into Kundalini yoga, into the community that sponsored this, that was Sikh based. And yeah, it really worked for me. I know that there are different paths into becoming a deeper meditator.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess it's kind of like you have to sample and figure out maybe what's clicking with you and what's resonating. For me, you noted in your book that you have dyslexia, and that's something I was diagnosed with as a child. But I don't know if that's morphed into something now that they call ADD or ADHD. I'm not sure, but I know I am like of this kind of hyped up, hyper kind of mindset, like you seem to indicate in your book, where you overthink things a lot, and it's a sort of a steady theme throughout the book, and I was relating to it constantly because it's just part of who I am. And so for me, meditating is challenging. For myself, what I do is I put on drone soundscapes, just things that keep that part of the mind just distracted, and it's nothing intrusive necessarily. It's almost just a background passive thing, but it keeps the narrator part. It eventually lulls it away for me, and then I can get into a nice void, a nice space where I know I'm still me in here and all that, but it's far less of me and far less of here. Yeah, that's the one thing I've found. But I'm lazy. I've not tried other disciplines, and I really need to. In fact, in your book, I found some meditations that I want to pursue and look into to add to my repertoire. So to that, I honor you and thank you for exposing that. And to the audience, there's some really good information in here if you are considering a mindfulness practice and you're looking for new ideas and new places to explore. I would say that this is rich in that. So now to the second bout of cancer that you were dealing with, the physician, your GYN oncologist was, or perhaps there was somebody else, I can't remember now, but they were saying, oh, we need to do radiation on, 2 layers, two kind of iterations of radiation on your body. And you were thinking, well, what's the cost benefit on that? So, hats off to you for having that courage to say, wait a minute, so I'll stop there and you can pick up and share, because you're going to do a much better job. But that was really inspiring that you went out on that limb and said, let me consider my options here.
Yeah, this is a careful calculation that anyone in that position would need to make, is how serious is this cancer, and can I afford to handle it in a different way?
Mm-hmm.
Me, when I learned that the results of the CAT scan that was done after the second round was discovered, the results of that CAT scan indicated there were no gross masses. It was not detectable in a CAT scan. Mm-hmm. They wanted to do an MRI and a PET scan right away, but I kind of decided, okay, I'm gonna take the gamble, and mainly because the potential side effects of full pelvic radiation, bathing all those organs in radiation, and then vaginal radiation,
mm-hmm.
Pretty harsh treatment. That I wasn't particularly excited about that. And when I met with the radiation specialist, she was point blank with me, mortality stats are 50% even with all this treatment. And I immediately thought, wow, I'm not sure they've come even out of the box with this one yet. They're mm-hmm. just throwing what gets done when you're not really exploring how to treat a cancer with other means. Mm-hmm. Either that or, yeah. So anyways, I was pretty disillusioned by that. I'd already switched into doing detox strategies and major diet changes. It was like going into an extra gear around the sense of seriousness and mortal threat that this level of reoccurrence represented to me. I really took it a whole lot more seriously than I did the first time, because the odds of the hysterectomy taking care of it were high. Mm-hmm. I came to appreciate that an environmental and a genetic perspective needed to be a whole lot more developed and nuanced. And that was the shift for me, treatment wise, is I have to take it a whole lot more seriously on these levels. Yeah.
Yeah. And you embarked, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Not going their route meant I had to take my own route super seriously.
Yeah. Yeah. And so then you did embark on this journey of discovery and learning and pulling in what was out at large there in the world to help yourself. And so you speak to a trip to, was it Wigmore, I think, Dr. Ann Wigmore's place in Puerto Rico, which, you know, if you're coming from New England in the wintertime, that's a nice start, right? Just going to PR for a little while. But I really enjoyed that segment of the book where you talk about what they were doing with you there. And you mentioned Hippocrates in your book as well. And we have this a Hippocrates just down the road from me here in Florida. And what a neat place. I know people who have worked there. And but anyway, let's talk about the Wigmore Institute down in Puerto Rico and your experience there, because I think that did, you know, give you proof of concept in terms of, well, not necessarily proof of concept, but good ideas to employ when you got back to your home.
I had a friend who went to the one in Florida dealing with a pretty serious health issue and had success. So I looked into it. And the one in Puerto Rico, the one in Florida, they come from the same foundation. Dr. Ann, she was a naturopath and had a clinic in Boston for years. And the doc, who's a director in Florida, worked with her in Boston. And the people in Puerto Rico were also, you know, worked with her, knew her.
Okay.
Yeah. No, there was a great curriculum there. For me, I'm always drawn to learning and felt that their emphasis on teaching me how was really valuable. You know, one of the things that I will say the breadth of that experience was watching what my classmates got out of it and how they benefited, and you know, the disparate conditions that they were dealing with that were improved by the use of that highly nutritious diet that was really helping their systems rebalance. It was impressive, and it kind of is proof that underlying causes of many diseases can be similar. You know, we need the really stellar bowel health and digestive health and nutrition status, and we need to move away from things that are causing inflammation and really bogging our system down.
When I was reading through that chapter on the Wigmore Institute, I wasn't shaming myself, and my wife and I are pretty good. We're mostly plant-based diet, and we try to do organic when we can. And but yeah, I still let some things like I said to you earlier, I eat chocolate sometimes, and you know, I have my sugar things. And I'm like reading your work, and I was thinking, and what you did there, I was thinking, oh, Justin, you need to buckle down, son, and you know, take better care of yourself. Yeah. So in other words, it was very inspirational. I was like thinking of ideas of like, oh yeah, we can do this and that, and I have been, you know, incrementally trying to improve that status in my life. But your book inspired me to. You speak a lot to raw food, and again, from the Wigmore experience, you know, that is just wide open. And I used to make my own kimchi, but now I just buy it from a local Vietnamese grocery store. So I get there, it's much better than mine. So, but you know, probiotics are really cool. You speak to some of the, you know, living food when you consume it, and the vitality in there. So yeah, it's very inspirational. In fact, when I was younger, about 30 years ago, I worked for an organic farm that was run by a cancer survivor, and we delivered to Hippocrates. And when I was in my 20s, and I was just blown away by that place. That's such a good energy to it, and the people there were really cool. And I had been a chef prior to working for this farm, and cook, well, as more of a cook, and just seeing the food that they were preparing there. And they had their own greenhouses where they did a lot of their what is it, wheatgrass and things like that, and the sprouts that they were doing. They had their own place for that down there. So really a fantastic place. So I'm glad you had that experience and came through it. And you exported that and brought it home with you, right?
Yeah, I still grow sprouts and I still make fermented cabbage drink. Did you ever experience that at the?
No, I have to do that. In fact, I've had people in my little light circle of friends that I have that are familiar with hypocrisy say, "Oh, you need to go there and have lunch, or you need to go do this and that." And they're always, extolling the virtues of the place. So it's about an hour's drive, so it's just far enough away where it's like you can't just go spring out for a casual lunch. But we'll get down there because there's not a heck of a lot in our immediate area that sort of serves that function, and so it would be worth the trip on a lazy day to go down there and just have a nice meal and indulge in some of that goodness. So I want to, maybe this is a good time. I want to read a quote from your book that really resonated with me, and I want to share this with the audience because there's a lot of kernels of wisdom in your book. So I'm just going to pull up a tab real quick that I can access this and just read a quick paragraph. And it said, let's see, this is on page 141, and it is, you say, "I had committed to continuing exploring what suited me, let go of a father-child concept of God or guru, and no longer saw a prayer life as mainly about being granted wishes. My sense of personal power wasn't based on the idea of manifesting what I wanted by believing hard enough or saying certain affirmations enough times. I accepted that some questions and mysteries about life and spiritual truths have no definitive answers. My path was to continue to sit with various unknowns." That really spoke to me and felt really powerful. And I think it kind of speaks for the courage that you had to have in surrendering to the idea that you're, like you said a moment ago, you're saying no to conventional medicine and the radiation and venturing out into the unknown. So that really hit me nicely. That quote. If you want to speak to that more, or we can move on to something else. But yeah, just the idea. And there's was it Michael? What's his name? He did the surrender experiment. Singer. He's a Florida guy. He wrote this thing called the Surrender. I think that's the name of the book. He wrote 2 books, and my wife's read both of them. I read one of them, but it speaks to that though. It's just like letting go and it's going out and allowing for things to unfold and present themselves, and then you can work in reciprocity with that or in concert with that. So if I'm doing that justice, if not, you can just say nope. But that's what struck me. It's just like you really got to just have some faith, that things with your astute attention and your diligence, that you can work in concert with life, with whatever you want to call it, with the process of life, to be more clear-headed about navigating experience, and especially in the place that you were in. That's just very courageous to me, I guess.
I think that my ruminative thinking tendency would manifest itself in terms of trying to figure out what was going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
I do this, is that going to happen? And you can get so wrapped up in kind of predicting the future that you're not capable of being present to ways that spirit comes and guides you in the present moment, or questions get answered through life experience, that kind of thing. So dropping this tendency to be trying to figure things out,
Mm-hmm.
or to be praying hard enough for something in particular, it actually felt like a big relief. It
Mm-hmm.
felt like, okay, finally I can relax my sense that somehow it's within my power to manipulate this for a certain outcome to happen.
Mm-hmm.
At a certain point, I'm giving it my best shot. I'm gonna try to be as conscious of what I need to be healing as possible. I'm got to be open to the fact that, hey, I tried all that the first time and it didn't really work. And I don't know why. I don't know what the kind of spiritual growth is this time around, but I'm better off just being open to it than exhausting a whole bunch of energy in the regrets or the trying to manufacture some outcome.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I guess it in part comes from an acceptance and an acceptance that I'm co-creating my life with other elements in
Mm-hmm.
the universe, and my part is to be as open and moving into kind of the right time, right place way of being
Mm-hmm.
as possible, and to accept that I'm not in charge. It is a co-creative process.
Yeah, I agree. And you touched on the idea of the left-right dichotomy of the brain. The woman who wrote the book Stroke of Genius, you mentioned her. And I follow a guy on mostly on YouTube, and his name's Dr. Ian McGilchrist, and he wrote The Master and His Emissary, and the whole book is about that sort of left-right dichotomy. And it almost becomes it's like he really emphasizes that. I was going to say it's almost like overwhelm, it's like this strong dichotomy, but I think it's a good teaching tool or heuristic about, following your heart versus following that strong intellectual aspect of yourself. And for you, you have an engineering background, and it makes sense that you would want algorithms to sort of, work through, what the problem is, and algorithms will produce outcomes, all the ABC kind of stuff. And so I get that, and that makes perfect sense. But nonetheless, when you follow the heart, which would be the if you want to say the right brain aspect of things, that's a powerful partner to analytical thinking and propositional thinking. And so that if you can get that synthesis going, or maybe just let the right brain take over when it's necessary and you need the left brain for other things, but just let that heart-centered thinking take over when it's necessary, and making big life and death decisions about yourself, existential decisions, I think is more of the right brain. So I acknowledge that, and I applaud that. I think, and to the audience, I think, this book again speaks to that kind of inspirational guidance that you can navigate through fear. You can navigate through the unknown, the existential threat of diseases like cancer, and some of the other people that were at the institute in Puerto Rico. You mentioned somebody with multiple sclerosis. There was somebody, multiple cancer survivors. There was a young man who had been in the military, and was it PTSD, or there was something, he was withdrawn and depressed and not eating very well, and he had a turnaround experience there.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
and maybe focusing on the diet and focusing on a healthy aspect of self-interest, which again is just, taking care of yourself holistically, rather, not so much the ego aspect, gives you that heart-centered clarity to make those kind of brave decisions and surrender.
There's a body intelligence too, we have to remember. And the body intelligence, when we can access it, is pretty amazing. But it's subtle.
Mm-hmm.
And we can easily get distracted by all these great things we could do out in the world, or our own thinking, or the ways we entertain ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So we're not basically in tune with, do I feel physically better when I do this? I think that particular veteran had quite the remarkable experience of actually feeling more alive, because his body was waking up and responding to being given really good nutrition and getting a chance to shed inflammation and
Mm-hmm.
that kind of thing.
Yeah. And speaking of shedding, you had spoken briefly about candida in the book as well. And so, getting those, I wouldn't say they're quite pathogenic, but they're certainly parasitic, and they're not good for you. So that you are aware that not only should you be, good food in, but, you know, taking care of, like you said earlier, bringing in the probiotics, bringing in prebiotics and things that will allow your body to fight off some of these yucky wee beasties that, you know, want to cause havoc and mayhem in our bodies. So I appreciated that too, because you know, sometimes we just get really black and white about our health, and we don't think about, like you said, the subtle body energy and things like that. That's just so nuanced, and or the good bacteria versus some of the stuff that you don't really want swimming around in you. And so it's a lot to think about. But once you start focusing on it, I don't think it's difficult. I think it's just more a matter of discipline and having a repertoire of practices that can facilitate better health for yourself, whether you're dealing with a serious issue or whether you just want to be preventative. Yeah. And like I said earlier, I think your book addresses both of those audiences, that you can read this book as a support mechanism for going through an experience, navigating a life-threatening issue or just a general well-being issue. And as well, if you're young and healthy and you're ahead of the curve and you want to be preventative, which I would applaud to no end, that this book can also speak to that as well and offer some sage in terms of that. So
I really wanted to provide an example that would empower people to think of their ability to chart their own course and basically be attentive to their health and not feel like they're being held hostage by a healthcare system that really is slow to respond or slow to recognize people's chronic health conditions. I think it's kind of a shame to feel disempowered if you're waiting, 6 months to go to the doctor because that's what you've been told is the next step. If you can actually start to, what can I do between now and then? So I was hoping to provide, real examples of the possibilities. And for me, it became an adventure, really. I explored a bunch of different things that I wasn't really aware of or interested in before. And it was an enriching and empowering experience that, was health enhancing. So I wish that integrative medicine were more a part of our healthcare system. I think it really needs to be. There's a certain challenge with health equity that is basically leaves many people with unmet needs. That were they aware of the power of nutrition, the power of listening to their body and seeking greater balance in different areas of their life, working through the layers of trauma or even a need, a fulfillment of, say, connection with nature or connection with a spiritual tradition. Those things are all empowering in a way that I hope to inspire other people to pursue.
Upon my reading it, I would say yes. Because again, you motivated me. I was thinking, again, I might score around 50 to 60 as far as like doing really good about, leading a healthy, mindful life. It might be in the mid-range somewhere, but I'm thinking, well, you can probably ratchet that up by the end of not the time, and not that there's any linearity necessary, but just thinking, a goal set, that you start eating a little more raw, start cutting out a little, a bit of sugar and so you got me going and you inspired me. And so I would say in your writing this book, this had to have been a journey for you, the writing of the book. And so when you step back after the book, was finished, how did you feel? I mean, what was that birthing experience like in the context of what you handled in the book? What was that like for you?
It was a pretty amazing journey. I felt like I couldn't publish anything until I was in the cured status range. So that set it at 5 years, really set the clock there.
Okay.
I really hadn't written anything major. I didn't really know how to write a memoir. I kind of, in parallel to all this, I started reading a lot of memoirs and reading authors who write about what a good memoir consists of, and started pulling those pieces together, listening to the advice of Mary Carr, who teaches memoir writing,
Okay.
and Stephen King has a book about writing that is pretty interesting.
Mm.
So I learned a lot that way, and I started, it's kind of going at it in layers. You started with kind of the factual parts of time sequence and how this all happened, and then pulling in kind of the deeper memories of lived experience that become more descriptive and start to layer in the storytelling aspects of it.
Okay.
I think one of the hardest parts was figuring out how to lace in my experience as a clinician and my sense of kind of the pulse of healthcare and all that, which I do toward the end of the book in the second part.
Mm-hmm.
Really feeling my way into how to make that fit with the book as a whole, and be accessible to people.
Mm-hmm.
So it was an interesting process. I did have a lot of readers, and my editor was great. It was a hybrid publishing company I used because my attempts to find an agent or a publisher were pretty unproductive. Yeah, I got one response from a potential agent, and she basically said, who wants to read another cancer memoir?
Yeah. Yeah, but it's just like there are brands of cars, there are styles of writing, and there are lived experience perspectives. And so phooey on her, or them, or whoever they were. Yeah, phooey. Because
Yeah, it's an unusual one because it's not all about what I did with the hospital and the doctor.
yeah.
Although my hat's off to the doctor who I worked with, because she didn't slam the door on my face.
No, you mentioned that. Yeah. Yeah. Dr. Knight, I believe. Yeah. And that's because you said that some doctors will fire their clients if they don't follow. And my wife helped a friend get through a breast cancer year, and the one oncologist was difficult. But our friend was even more difficult, in a good way, stubborn, and prevailed. And so yeah, I think it's just, you have to sort of stand your ground, and but no, don't do that blindly, I guess. But understand what's going on, and what options you may have. And I think you hit on something important earlier. You were mentioning in your book that the second vaginal cancer was not super fast, not super aggressive, not going to take you out in 6 months, so that you did have that time to do that. So yeah, and that's explained in the book. So to the audience, I would say, keep that in mind, and get all the good information you can about your own personal experience. It's common sense, caveats need to be applied to these kind of situations. But now, this is a little out of the continuity of where we've been moving with the conversation in your book, but there's a lived experience that I think is a good allegory. And for those who are coming to this conversation who may have just gotten the diagnosis, may have just gotten the PET scan results or whatever, and they're scared, they're upset. You talk about the Duck Island experience with, I believe, a couple of your nieces, or were they friends? There were children you were walking.
Yeah.
Yeah, so share that one with us, because I think that's a good way. And again, maybe continuity, I should have brought that up earlier, but this is good because it for somebody who's just coming out of the gates, this is a good, you shared this, and I thought, yeah, this is a good metaphor.
I was on an island with my family at a family reunion, and this was off the coast of Maine. The island was shaped like a duck, So it had a body, a neck, a head, a belly. Anyways, my daughter, my niece and I, they were 7 and 5, I want to say, maybe a little bit older, decided we want to go for a walk along the beach. And to do that, we had to walk away from the path that would knowingly take us someplace and go along the shoreline. I was aware that if I keep the ocean on my right, we should come around the head of the duck to the back of the duck and a cove where there's a path take us back to the house. So we had to leave the beach because it got rocky on the shoreline. We had to clamber up into this cliff. And again, I was aware of keeping the water on my right. Climb over a bunch of trees. It got because there had been a lot of tree fall. So we had to climb over some trees, and we came down back onto the beach, and the fog had rolled in. So it looked like this cove we'd never seen before. My niece looked down in the sand and she saw 3 sets of footprints, 2 little and 1 big. And she said, "Aunt Jess, aren't those our footprints?" And I initially said to her, "Oh, no, this is a different cove. We haven't been here before." And then I started thinking about it, and I realized the fog had come in. I didn't recognize the cove, but it was the same cove. It had somehow crossed over at the point of the neck back onto the head of the duck, and we had done a big loop. The kids were exhausted. They didn't want to keep going. When we came to the part where you have to clamber up onto the cliff, they kind of collapsed into the moss and said, "We're not going any further."
Cashing out.
Yeah, I at that point was like, "What do I do? These are big kids."
Yeah.
I said, "Okay, well, we'll have to consider this a good place to sleep tonight because it's going to be dusk and
Yeah. Yikes.
the mosquitoes will like it."
Yeah, oh yeah. It's a buffet.
Anyway, popped back into gear, and we continued on around. And this time the fog had lifted. I was much more vigilant about not losing track of where the ocean was. We came down in the swimming cove we'd been in the day before. We found the path back to the house as the light was really fading. And walking through the woods, it was getting darker and darker. I started calling a certain call that we used as kids to locate each other in the woods. And eventually heard the call back, and we knew we were headed back to the safety of where everybody was. When I looked at that story, I really felt like it was allegorical for my journey with cancer, that I had to make the second round. I had to do it more consciously. I had to really keep up my resolve, even though it was a whole darker time, and that was necessary to get me back to better health. Yeah.
So can I intuit then that this was the wellspring of the title? Like, this is where the title comes from, the path forward, or is there another story behind a path forward that you can share?
No, I don't think it was the wellspring. I think that was the name of a chapter. And one of my editors suggested that that become the title of the book. And in one of my revisions of the preface, that story occurred to me as a great way to talk about how the book comes in basically two different stories. The first round with cancer, then the second round with cancer.
Okay. I'd like to cover, I kind of hinted at it earlier, with functional medicine. You note the 5 R's of functional medicine. I thought maybe we could put that out for the audience, and there are probably people here that might know about functional medicine, but this might be a good way to spark some curiosity to the listeners about functional medicine and those tenants that arrived that happen to have R's that start with R's. So could you share that?
Yes, I'm digging for them, right?
Oh, I have it queued. I found chapter 27. So if you want, I can read them off and then you can talk about it a little. Okay, yeah, I did that. I sort of figured that might be good because that's how I would want to. Okay, so in the beginning of chapter 27, Revelations and a Plan Going Forward, you start in the first paragraph. The 5 R's are remove, replace, reinoculate, repair, and redirect. And I can keep that available so we can, if you want to tackle them all as one kind of general thing, or you want to maybe open up each one, it doesn't matter to me. But I like that string.
Yeah, it's a great one for a lot of different conditions. Looking at people individually, with the remove part has to do with what's contributing to the harm that's happening in the body.
Mm-hmm.
It's something to do with excesses in the diet or allergies to different foods. Is it, in my case, it was really about reducing sugar because cancer cells so thrive on excess sugar in the body. That and the whole detoxing process that I followed was using a lot of sauna therapy and getting rid of toxins through my skin by sweating a lot and the infrared light.
Mm-hmm.
Taking supplements that aided with liver detox and being sure that I was getting a lot of fiber in the diet, keeping my bowels full, and drinking a lot of fluids. So really flushing a lot, re-inoculating. That's number 2, I believe. No.
Let's see. I'm going to keep us honest here. And so, excuse me. Yeah. Remove, replace, reinoculate 3, and then repair and redirect. So.
Right. So the replacing, of course, is how you leverage nutrition in a lot of cases. So reinoculating, we could think of that as really, the digestion is so important in so many healing conditions. And because we are co-creating, co-digesting with the organisms that are beneficial in our body, that help us leverage all the food we're eating and being able to use that nutrition to regenerate ourselves. We really want that, the benefit of that. Yeah.
Sage advice. We're coming up on what we kind of thought would be a good timeline. Or a stopping point. Do you want to share anything that we may not have addressed in the conversation, or do you have anything to say in a conclusion, in a summary? Is there anything you want to bring forward before we leave the audience with this conversation? We wrap things up.
One of the books that I discovered in the process of writing this book was the book Deep Survival.
Okay.
In that book, Deep Survival, he talks about a number of different people who survived really adverse circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
And he kind of distilled the characteristics that these people manifested in the process of surviving. And when I read that book, I was already in the years where I was pretty much not dealing with cancer, but waiting to get the cured status.
Mm-hmm.
I was surprised to discover that I had basically I'd found my way to each of those 12 principles, and they're pretty interesting. I could read that part if you want.
Sure, yeah. And while you're reading, would you mind if I did a screen share? And on your website, you have my picks, and I think there's like 4 books there, this being one of them. Would you like me to have that up while you're reading it? Do you think that would be nice? And I will have the link to Jocelyn's website down below in the description field. Or I don't have to get that.
Sure.
We can get fancy here. Okay, while you're reading, I'll pull that screenshot up just for a second. People can do a freeze frame on it and get the titles. But yeah, if you want to start, and I'll just do a quick share. But there's Deep Survival, and these are some of your other picks
Yeah.
here on your website. And again, that link will be available down below. So, and again, if you're watching this on YouTube, you can freeze this and write things down. But yeah, if you would, Jocelyn, if you could share that, that would be neat.
Okay, so the setup is this comes from Deep Survival. Surprisingly, without realizing it, my strategies for getting through my cancer challenges had many of these characteristics. I avoided dwelling in self-pity. I moved into acceptance of the situation pretty quickly, making it easier to go my own way and use reason and emotion to create a plan. I listened to my privacy needs and insulated myself in necessary ways to minimize what was too socially stressful. I found tools to calm the extremes in my fear cycles, so fear would remain a helpful emotion instead of driving me crazy. I found rituals of movement and sound to help me create a sense of order, which helped me to refocus my awareness. I used mantras and affirmations to calm my frantic mental states and redirect me to the next best thing to focus on. I found a sense of purpose in creating a view of the future I wanted to aim for. I used a talisman of hope and healing and found a way to be uplifted by my spiritual beliefs. I found a deepened sense of connection to all of life, to my own life, and to an enriched spirituality. I am awed and humbled by all I've learned from this experience, and I am grateful.
Wow, that's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. That's really a good way to come to the end of our conversation, because yeah, that'll give folks, and please rewind that and find the book on Jocelyn's site if you're interested. Speaking of talisman, is this what you're wearing? Is the one you got that you speak to in your book?
This is the one that was given to me.
Yeah, that was really neat. It's a part of the story. So Jocelyn, thank you for sharing that. Also, thank you for writing this book. I will set the loving intention that it will go out to the world and find who it needs to find. As much as this conversation, I hope this conversation reaches the people that should find it. And like that cynical publisher or whomever it was, okay, so maybe there are different stories for different people, but that's never a reason to shoot anything down. So there will be the right people that will resonate with what you're doing, with your story, and what a beautiful gift to give to the world. So I want to just honor that and acknowledge that you've given that to the world.
Well, thank you so much for this opportunity. I've really enjoyed speaking with you and a chance to share more of the details about the book. I do hope it reaches a lot of people.
Yeah. I think it has a lot of sage in it, and I think it has a lot of practical and useful information. It's honest in the sense that it's not like this, whipped up into a story that says, oh, you two can do this and this is perfect and you're going to have this wonderful outcome. It's very pragmatic, and it just shares your experience. So I like that, and I appreciate that, because sometimes these stories about transcendence and beating odds and doing things like that, it can almost be a little too Panglossian, if that's the right term. It's like really a little too optimistic and positive. But I don't think your book portrayed that at all. I think it was just a very honest revelation of your experience and what you did, and other people can unfold that into their own experience, take away what resonates with them, take away what's salient, And that's the honesty and the authenticity that I found in your book that led us to have this conversation. So I appreciate that. So Jocelyn, again, thank you for that. Thank you for this conversation. I appreciate that. May it have a good life and go out into the world and again, do good for others. So and to the YouTube audience, thank you guys so much for listening and taking this in and consider Jocelyn's book. I discovered the other day that it is on SoundCloud. You can, if this is right, you can order it and have it as an audiobook. I saw that.
Really?
I hope that's something that you're benefiting from. I can send you the link. When I was Googling a path forward, there was a SoundCloud and there was some person who said, you know, hit the link below to get a copy of a path forward. Maybe it's another book.
Well, let me know. I'd like to take a look at it.
Okay, I'll do that because if that's somebody that's impinging on your intellectual property, we'll get that taken care of. So yeah, I'll send the link. It may be a different book. I could be dead wrong. I didn't open it up because there's probably a paywall or something attached to it. So all right, I can send that to you. But anyway, the book itself is available through booksellers and you can access it. And again, I'll have a link to Jocelyn's website and you can access the book that way. So all right. Thank you, Jocelyn. I'll say goodbye to you after we stop record, but to the YouTube audience, thank you guys so much. And I'll see you guys in the next conversation. Take care, everyone.